Jonathan! I think you look dapper today, Jonathan. Don't let anybody tell you anything. What are you doing with your life? Come on, get it together.
Some kid just clotheslined me and hit me in the leg, and I'm not gonna lie. It's like rammed in my leg.
You rammed in your leg? Hey, Nicholas, am I live? Can you hear me okay?
You are now?
I am now. All right, so this is getting ridiculous, guys. Like the whole center section is empty. Thank you. I'd like you to be a little closer to the center. Why are you taking my ladder, Dimitri? I want that back in here, Dimitri. That's mine. That's actually my physical ladder. Make sure it comes back in here. Yep. I'm fine with you taking it. Just make sure it finds its way back in, please. Thank you. Everybody on live stream, Dimitri stole my ladder. He came in. You're my witnesses. You're my witnesses. You're my witness, Molly. But you heard me. Okay. All right. Okay, so the tomfoolery has to be over now. We got to get started. So let's get started. This was my fault. I started the crazy energy, and it's just permeate. Actually, no, you started it, Katie, by yelling at Jonathan when he came in. So I blame you. You started the weird energy today, so we gotta bring it down. We gotta bring it down. It's my fault. It's my fault, Noah. I'm not taking control of the class, Noah. I haven't taken control of the class yet, Noah. So it's my fault. I apologize. Noah's all mellow, and he's like, "This is getting way too much energy for me." Anyway, so a couple things before we get started on today's on the continuation of our lesson. So this past week we had Yom HaShoah. Hopefully you guys, I don't know if you guys are all still looking at Remind. It actually had a tear in my eye. I'm not going to be shy about that. To think about how they honor it in Israel, literally for 2 minutes, everyone stops. I mean, cars on the road stop. People in Jerusalem stop. Everything they do for 2 minutes in honor of the people who were murdered by the Nazi in the Nazi camps. So, and as we, if you saw the service, Yom HaShoah service, or you just read the news, right, or whatever your particular news outlet is, anti-Semitism is on the rise because of ignorance. Not just ignorance about the Jewish people, but ignorance about what it means. It's easily, and one of the reasons why I do these apologetics classes is because you got to understand what you believe, because you can be easily fooled by people who use slick words and interesting concepts. And that's what's happening. People are being fooled into believing it's okay, these things are all right, that you're showing your pride by being nasty to another race, culture, religion, whatever. And so that's why we do these things. On a more positive note, that was kind of a downer, but on a positive note, next week is Jerusalem Day, so Jerusalem Independence Day. So I've got a couple of you I volunteered to read for us. I have your scripture quotes, so see me after. Not you. I know, I got you hooked up, man. You're good. We're good. We're connected. But invite your friends. This is a good opportunity for people in your sphere of influence, so to speak, to kind of see what this is all about and not be fooled by the ignorance of the world around them, but actually witness those types of things and what we do and how we do it, not just from a messianic perspective, but from a Jewish frame of reference, right? So it's an opportunity for you guys to bring your friends. It's a good thing. I'm sure we're gonna have food and stuff. Yes, ma'am. We're gonna be food and stuff. Yeah. There's a whole picnic thing going on. We're gonna have tents, and it's gonna be a whole long activity. So, do you still work at Lowe's? Okay, I thought you were working Sunday. I was going to come give you a hard time, but you weren't there. I was looking for him. Like, where's Roy? I'm going to mess with him, and he wasn't there. Anyway, so the only reason I thought is because if you can't, only reason for not coming and bringing your friends is if you have to work. So I expect to see you guys there. Well, for those of you who can drive. For those of you who can't drive, talk to your parents about letting you stay. So anyway, so it's right after services. It'll be integrated into our services next week. Like I said, we have some folks from our we want to give encouragement to. We're going to stand up in front of everybody and read some scripture. And again, it's a good opportunity to educate peers who may not understand. I don't know if any of you, at least ancillarily have experienced anti-Semitism. Even if you're not Jewish yourself, hearing other people say things, even subtle things that are anti-Semitic, right? It's up to us to help educate the ignorant in those things. And so, anyway, so it's an opportunity to do that through our high holy days, but also through. And like Anna and I were talking, she had an experience when she was in high school where people were like, "Well, I don't understand your religion. I don't understand your. It sounds weird." Yeah, because we have culture and we live in a cultural Christian environment, right? Versus a biblical. Yeah, versus biblical. Yeah. Oh, you're just sensitive.
I literally saw a news story this week where this kid at a Fort Mill high school went to the bathroom and came back and someone had drawn a swastika on his desk, and the school board was like, "Whoops, sorry." Like their response. So the tank up and that was mad. Yeah, exactly. Their response was like, "Oh, whoops. Don't worry, we'll handle it." And handling it is like
yeah.
Everyone's awkward about anti-Semitism now. It's not that big
a deal. My bad, bro. Actually, one of my situations went off.
So what were you saying there, Arden?
On like Tuesday, we watched like something on CNN 10 where they do like the 10 minutes news.
Sure.
It was a thing about a Holocaust. Like they were interviewing a Holocaust survivor.
Mm-hmm.
The kid thought it'd be funny to say something kind of anti-Semitic. The teacher went off on him for like a good 2 minutes. So at least some right.
Yeah, there's some people who kind of see it. Yeah. You what now?
I brought him on a key. My teacher asked me to, and the principal came down like, Jesus wasn't Jewish. And I was like,
wow. Like I said, ignorance is everywhere, and it's up to us to educate. That's why, for those of you who are members, that's what your calling is. That's what you said your calling is the idea of educating the ignorant on who the real Messiah is versus this culturated piece that, that people like to bend the will of Scripture to meet their own needs. I teach a series in Romans, I haven't done it in a while, on 9 through 11, which is all about Israel and Israel's call. But it's funny because if you look at Romans as a whole is broken down in chapters 1 through 11 are all doctrinal dogma. So this is what faith is. And then 12 through 15 and a half is all about how do you apply it. But what happens in a lot of churches is they look at 9 and 11 as a parenthetical, not as actual core doctrine, too core to the doctrine of faith, because it doesn't meet their cultural alignment. Now, Sam, like if you haven't seen the Yom HaShoah service that was Sunday, I highly recommend you go out to the website and look at it. Sam was on. He was, for a little old man, he was on fire. I'm joking. We all know who Sam is, but it wasn't the kind and gentle Sam. It wasn't the grandfatherly Sam. He was on it. So I recommend you see it. I recommend you go watch it. All right. All right. So after that, any questions about any of that stuff not that we just talked about, but any questions about next week or anything, anybody? So it'll be next week. It'll be Jerusalem. It'll be Jerusalem Independence Day. We'll have all kinds of stuff, flags everywhere. It'll be a great time, but almost like a mini, if you've never been to a Simchat Torah service, like that kind of thing, where there's a lot of joy and a lot of cool stuff. So, yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be like during Oneg and beyond. Yeah, it's gonna be like a whole picnic afternoon. Yeah. Yeah, next week, the 28th. 29th. All right. Cool. That's what I wanted to say. Is that okay, Roy? We good now? We're good. Okay, good. All right. So when last we left our heroes, we were still kind of making our way around downtown. Sorry. I have a whole bunch of TV references that just float in my head at any random time. We were taking a look at apologetics, right? And the idea of defending your faith. And this is that's all part of it. And actually, Dr. Brown actually has a series on apologetics specifically to answering the objections that Jewish people have to the faith. and it's like an 8-book series. I was going to get the first one as sort of general, and I've never done it. I've to teach it here, because I think that's a general understanding of, if you're a part of a Messianic community, it'd be good for you to understand what maybe some of the resistances, if you don't encounter or are around Jewish people all the time, you may not understand what some of their concerns are, other than what we've told you either from here or from Sam or David or anybody else. So, but anyway, that's all part of apologetics, again, defending the faith. So what we've covered so far is 2 things. Truth is real. It's possible that there is truth, not what that truth is, but that it's possible, right? It's possible it's true. So when someone says there is no truth, is that a true statement, right? So we can bounce that ball back, right? Play a little tennis with them. Ping pong. Anyway, and then the other one was, which may seem obvious, and why would I even state this, but it's still something that needs to be stated, which is the opposite of true is false. Is not true or false, right? And the idea that you can get really philosophical with this, and look at the idea the one can't exist without the other. You can't have truth without falsehood, and you can't have nothing can be false without truth, because there needs to be some plumb line, some line that says on the left side of this line is one way and on the right side of this line is another. If you don't have that, then there's not two things, right? Like red and purple. Or if you look at the color wheel, right? Blue and yellow are on opposite sides of the color wheel. The idea that you have to have opposites, night and day, right? Everything's split. Even eras are split by Messiah. Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, meaning after, and BCE, before the common era, before Christ, BC, before Christ. Yeah, well, that's the Christian community sort of viewpoint, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but if you see sort of in general historical, they use BCE, before the common era, and then CE, because they're removing Messiah from it. They're removing Messiah from it. That's simply what they're doing there. Anyway, so the next point we kind of touched on last week was we want to prove that a theistic God exists. A theistic God exists. Does anybody remember the 3 general theisms, the 3 general worldviews of God? Not quite. You got some of it, not all of it. Some of them kind of can be grouped together a little bit. So you have theism. What's the opposite of theism? Atheism, meaning opposite, right? And then finally, pantheism, which is, so it's the idea of God made all. So you say God made all, right? So we see that in Judaism, and it's monotheism for the most part, right? So it's, no, not for the most part, it's monotheism, one God. So we have Judaism, Christianity, Messianic, and Islam all believe in theism, believe in a single God. Then you have atheism, there's no God at all, so that's secular humanism or humanism, basically natural, the world formed out of nothing. Really? Okay. Yeah, we're all just here, man. All right. And then the last one is pantheism. God is all. So he's like Zen, Buddhism, Hinduism, New Age. He's in everything. So the God of this, the God of that, the God is here. The God, you know. So they're taking this idea of God is omnipresent to say that it's not one God in everything. It's every God is in everything. So there's sort of a different turn of that, right? So instead of God is the creator of the sky, they're saying the sky God. See him like a, well, so so Katie, that's a great example, Katie. Yeah, exactly. So the idea, he shakes up every so often. We're like, whoa. But yeah, so the idea that the universe is a self-contained unit created by God, and God is outside that universe. So we can look at the universe as the collection of nature, of the natural reaction, right? So he created something that has natural reactions, right? Right. The idea of plants growing, needing sunlight, needing air, needing water, those types of things, right? The fact that we breathe oxygen, we're going to get into all that too. But the idea that there's this, God created this natural reaction, right? Nature, the natural world, and then he is outside that natural world, which is called supernatural. Supernatural is anything that occurs outside of nature, that is not controlled by the laws of nature. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Sorry, it's for something I need.
That's fine. I don't remember what I said, though.
Can you repeat?
So the idea of supernatural is anything that's outside of nature, that's not ruled, that's not governed by the rules of nature. It's outside of nature.
I feel like you could go to the lighthouse and say you could go to live stream.
It's okay. So the concept is, to your point, right? This would be the snow globe. We're outside looking in. Or if you're a baker, this is the cake or pie or whatever, that you are the creator that's outside of it. You're not part of it. You're not baking yourself into the pie, which sounds marvelous. But anyway, the idea that you're outside of that. So you're super cake, outside of the cake, outside the snow globe. No, that's silly. Anyway, and then you have atheism, which says there's only the universe. That's all there is. There's only the natural laws. Yep, that's all it is. There's only natural laws. So like if you come down in the morning and someone has made breakfast for you and you see eggs and turkey sausage and some potatoes on the table, but there's nobody there, you're not going to say, wow, nature formed a breakfast for me out of nowhere. You're going to think somebody did what? Made it for you. There's a creator who created the breakfast. Or if you come down and you see a beautiful cake, you're going to be like, wow, all the molecules in the air overnight swung around and magically made this cake that looks like this. No, you're going to assume there's a baker, right? You're smiling because that sounds silly. It just sounds silly, doesn't it? To think that something just created out of nothing. That there was nothing and then there was something. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. And then there's pantheism, which is basically not separating God or the universe, that they're all one. They're all one. Yeah, God is the snow globe. You love that snow globe? I think you should go with it. Stick with it. Double down. It's a good analogy. But double down on that bad boy. Triple down on that. All right. And then we talked about worldview and what impacts our worldview. The idea that what impacts our worldview? What is a worldview? What is worldview? What is a worldview? I need you to speak up, Jonathan. I need you to speak up with your adult voice.
My whole history thing,
Mhm.
this year, it was about geography, but it also included worldviews around the world. So I had to learn about what a worldview was, and I can't remember the definition.
Okay. It doesn't have to be a formal definition.
A set of beliefs or ideals that a person has.
Sure. And what impacts those, Katie? What impacts those? True, but what impacts those? What impacts those things? Things around you, like what? Be specific. People. And their own ideas. What other things impact worldview? Roy, what impacts worldview besides people? Experiences. What else? Natural disasters can form. Yep. Right side of the room. Anybody got any insights? What can impact a worldview? You're awful quiet over on the right side, and that right side is not a quiet group. What else can impact worldview besides people and experiences and nature? What else can? Pardon? Religion. What you believe. Yes. What else? Molly in the back row. What can impact worldviews other than people and experiences and nature and religion? What was that? Trauma. Trauma can as well. Personality. Aiden, you got any others? You think you come from them all? Right? It could be environmental too. What environment you grew up in. Pardon? Resources you have, right? What's that called in again? The essential what that you learned in Montessori the first week of school? The essential what? The core whatever? Hierarchy of needs, right? The idea that the various hierarchy of needs. Yeah, the idea of hierarchy of needs, so I have a good friend of mine, who, when he was during formative years, one of his hierarchy of needs wasn't being met. Simple, safety, but also a house, an infrastructure. He literally, his house burned down and he had nowhere to live. He was homeless for a period of time when he was a senior in high school. Nowhere to live. He had a pair of pants, a pair of shoes, and a shirt to his name. Barely survived the fire. He was on the 3rd floor and he had to jump out the window. Dead of night, sleeping. But the idea that, so if one of his hierarchy of needs is impacted, history too, yeah, history as well. So all these things can affect our worldview. Okay. So a set of assumptions that govern our explanation of life and everything in it, a collection of core beliefs we hold without deliberately choosing them. So again, Roy's experience and Noah's experience, even though they live in the same house with the same parents, may be different. Their worldviews could be slightly different based on Roy being in high school almost out, Noah getting ready, or in high school too, but just starting, or who their friend groups are, or various things like that, right? So like Anna and Garrett, I used last week, their worldviews can be slightly different, even though they grew up in the same house with the same parents with the same values based on their experience. Anna finished high school at a particular high school. Garrett left that high school and went to a different one. That immediately changed views of how they see certain things. Anyway, underlies our philosophy of life and theology. And again, a lot of it's subconscious. You don't recognize or realize, unless you go to therapy, that you're doing certain things or you have certain views on stuff until you acknowledge them. Right? It took a long time for me to realize, and it actually until I had a family, that I'm very anxious before any kind of, if I'm engaging in some sort of sporting event. Very anxious. I don't know why. So when I used to do triathlons, I'd go by myself. Well, there was one time that I brought the family, and I made their life hell because I was so focused and anxious about what I was going to do the next day. And there were just little kids. I think you were like 6 or 7, and Garrett was like 4 or 5. And I'm, come on, let's go. We got to do this. And because I had a process in my mind of how things had to work. And again, it was subconscious. It wasn't until my wife's like, "We're not coming with you again, because you're a jerk. You're yelling at everybody." And I did. It was unconscious. So those things can be unconscious, right? That's what a worldview can have, that piece too. You don't know how it impregnates your personality or your thinking processes. All right. So let's keep going. That's what we covered last week, and I realize we're going to run out of time. How we see things and what we hold important shape our worldview. So what Katie Nichols thinks is important for her life may be different than what Noah does, based on where they are in their lives, where they are in their walks, geographically, gender, whatever, right? So we all understand. I'm beating that dead horse. Critically important to understand and distinguish between them, right? So we understand that we see what a worldview is, and we distinguish between them. And beneficial to explore, discover, and understand and articulate your own worldview. So what do I believe? That's a question I leave, and I'm not leave because we're going to continue with the lesson, but something to think about or ponder or meditate on this week. What do I really believe? What do I know is true about what I believe? What do I truly know about my belief in who I am and what I actually believe? Not what my parents have told me, right? Not what my friends have said. Not what I regurgitate on a regular on command when Mr. Gary asks me a question like, "Who's the answer of all questions?" Right? Right? Does Edward really believe that, or is it like a Pavlovian response? Right? Nothing against Edward. I think he does believe it. I know Edward. I think he's pretty sure he believes that. But the idea is, what do you truly believe? That's important to get to as we build our faith, because as you get older, you're going to be questioned on it. And if you're not solid with who you are, it's going to be difficult for you to talk to other people about who they are. All right, so let's get back to the theistic worldviews. So the theistic worldviews, the idea is theism, which I am a big proponent of. I believe in theism. I believe in monotheism. I believe that there's one God, echad, a unique triunity, right? But how do I prove that? How do I explain that to somebody who maybe is Hindu and grew up in a pantheistic environment that believes God's in everything? They got 1,000 gods with 1,000 different holidays. Most of them are female gods in a lot of ways. It can be. It can be. Those who have an ingrained belief system like that can be more difficult than atheists, right? So we're going to talk about this a bit, and I'm telling you, some of this is going to get heavy, right? I don't intend it to, but it's going to get heavy, right? I want you to remember 3 core things. To answer this question, the 3 arguments for the existence, there are 3 core general categories that are the arguments for the existence of God. Cause, design, and morality. Whatever other big word I'm going to use, because I like using big words because it makes me feel smart, It comes down to cause, design, and morality. Science is the search for causes, why things are the way they are. How many scientists do I have in this room? How many people like science and like dealing with science? I love experiments. I used to love experiments, right? I used to love trying to figure out how things work. And I've sort of lost that luster as I've grown older because I'm like, yeah, it just works, right? It's magic, right? It's magic. But the idea is, how you mix compounds together. Like burning magnesium was always interesting to me because it was super bright. It's like, oh my God. Or taking sodium and dropping it into water and seeing the explosion, but then saying, hey, I wonder if I add the surface area to sodium, whether it will happen. So I took a chunk of sodium and diced it down into very small pieces and threw it and blew a hole in the ceiling in my chemistry class. And I was never allowed to do the chemistry projects anymore. Luckily, he was my tennis coach, so he's like, I'm just going to pass you on the lab. You're going to sit there with your hands crossed and not blow up my lab anymore. Because I used to take a big hunk of because they used to store it in oil because you can't store it in water because the reaction. And a big chunk doesn't matter because there's less surface area, so it's a smaller explosion. You have to chop it up very finely, and when you throw it, big explosion, blew a hole in the tiles in the ceiling. It's like, all right, we're done. You're done. But anyway, so again, I want to be crystal clear because again, repetition is a key. Whatever else I say, understanding the three arguments are cause, design, and morality. Being able to articulate those three things that prove that a God exists is critical, right? Because again, atheism says there is no God. So what caused the world to be formed, right? Same thing with design. That idea of that beautiful cake. Who designed it? Not me. Yeah. But if we were to come into your house and there was a cake sitting on your table, we're not going to say, oh, wow, like I said, oh, the molecules got to get, no, we're going to say, Katie probably made this cake, right? Yeah, exactly. And then finally, morality. That's the fun one. Because why do we have the moral identity that we have? Why is murder wrong? Don't want to answer. That's not the point, right? But the idea is that why is thievery, why is it wrong to steal? We got to understand that morality behind that, right? Anyway, so first one, cause. The big word is cosmological. And the proof is this. Everything that had a beginning has a cause. Universe had a beginning, therefore universe has a cause. So there are two causes. There could be two possible causes for the creation of the universe: natural or intelligent. Right? I guess you could take a look at it as creation versus evolution. Right? Creation versus evolution. Those are getting into some nuances, but you're right. Yeah, there's micro. There is micro, yeah. The idea that I don't look like my ancestors based on years of, genetics going, yeah. That's microevolution. I've changed based on, my ancestors were probably short little Italians running around. Anyway, so yes, Molly. You had a question or you're just raising your hand for random reasons? Okay. Okay, moving on. All right. So the principle of causality. So the idea of causality, this cosmological argument says every event has a cause. Nothing cannot produce something. Yep. So you're working from a presuppositional perspective. We're still defining that to come that to be true. But the idea is the study of science is the study of cause. So because you're a believer doesn't mean you're not a scientist anymore. Because you're still studying cause. I just believe that God created, as Molly eloquently put it, created the universe, and I don't believe there can be any other explanation, but we're not there yet. We have to prove it. We have to prove that this proof is true. Because Nicholas, as Nicholas will tell you if he teaches this, that if I start out with a faulty premise, what do I come up with? An incorrect conclusion, right? If I start with a faulty premise, I ultimately come up with a faulty conclusion. So we have to study and make sure that everything really had a beginning. What you'll find in a lot of cases when you're arguing with atheists is they start with a faulty premise. And so they can come up with what seems to be a logical conclusion, but it's wrong because the premise started out being incorrect. Exactly. If you start out wrong at the top, you're never going to make it to the end. Also, the universe had a beginning. Major discussion point of creation and evolution is either no one. So the two main differences, if you categorize between creation and evolution, is this: evolution believes no one created something out of nothing. No one made something out of nothing. Right? Creation says someone created something out of nothing. In the history of the universe, in the history of creation, has there ever been a finding that nothing created something out of nothing? Other than what they believe they believe the greatest miracle, we'll get there too, the greatest miracle of all time was the creation of the universe. So they believe the single greatest point in history, the creation of the universe, is unscientific. Because they're saying nothing caused something to produce something.
It was like they had like a piece of food in the bottle and they sealed it, and then suddenly like maggots came out of it. They're like, it's a miracle. It's out of nothing.
Yeah, there are things. It starts out with something.
Bread.
Natural law.
It was one of them.
So it's impossible for there to be only natural law, no intelligent design. Natural law cannot produce specified complex systems like books, computers, sculptures, and such. The principles of uniformity state, however nature has acted in the past, it's pretty much how we. Oh wait, I've moved on. That's something different. I've jumped the ship here. So the idea. So that's the cause. We have to define the cause. That's the proof. And we'll probably only get through this today. The next proof is design or teleological. That's the bigger word. Teleological. Yep. You are correct. So the proof for design is every design has a designer. Universe and life have a complex design. Therefore, the universe and life have a designer. And we're going to talk about that in concept of what's called irreducible complexity. But we're not ready to talk about that yet. It is impossible for there to be only natural law and no intelligent design. Natural law cannot produce specified complex systems like books, computers, sculptures, and such. The principle of uniformity states, however nature has acted in the past is pretty much how we expect it to act in the future. That's forensics. So, forensic science is the study of like crime scenes and stuff, right? But how does that work? They're basically understanding of the way certain things work in the past that was observable is the same way they would work in the present, right? So the idea that the trajectory of a bullet, if you're looking at a scene where someone gets shot, is do bullets travel like this without touching anything? No. They do what? They go in a straight line. So that's how they're able to see the trajectory and understand that if the shooter was standing here, then he could have shot in this direction, or even the angle, he's a left-handed shooter versus a right, because they understand in uniformity that the way that reaction responds in the past is the way it would continually respond in a uniform fashion. Unless you're a superhero. In Ecclesiastes 1:9, it says, what has been, it is what will be, and what has been done, it will be done. So there is nothing new under the sun. The same sin that stricken Adam and Eve is the same sin that Messiah was tempted with in the wilderness, is the same sin that we're stricken with today. The delivery mechanism may be different, may not be an apple anymore, but the three types of sin haven't changed. The principle of uniformity, what happened in the past. There are two basic types of design. Empirical, or observational, and historical. There will be a slide with all this stuff on it, so I know you're all feverishly taking notes. There'll be a slide when we talk about this. So, I know no one's taking notes. I was being ironic. I was being ironic. I was being ironic. There's a little, hi, I'm Gary. I'm sarcastic sometimes. Nice to meet you. So observational or empirical says repeatable observation and measurement followed by analysis, hypothesis building and testing. It is essential to note that these activities can only be done in the present. So observational are done in the present. Forensic or historical are unobservable or unrepeatable events of the past. Distant past is neither observable nor repeatable, so scientists must make multiple assumptions about past events. Again, gravity is gravity. Projectiles work in the projectile way. All right, finally, and we're going to review this again because this is, like I said, this gets heavy. I don't intend it to, but it does. Finally, morality. So the three main reasons, there are three main arguments. You got to prove cause, you got to prove that there truly is a designer, and we look at morality. So the moral argument is this: every law has a lawgiver. There is absolute moral law. That's going to be the linchpin of a lot of the conversations you have. Is there truly absolute moral law? Right? And then finally, therefore, there's an absolute moral lawgiver. So when you do debate, right, Josh? So the idea is you have to start with a premise, and you're looking at it from a uniform perspective, that there is an absolute that's being discussed. So you have one person that takes the alternate that tries to prove against that, right? And you have somebody that's on the affirmative trying to prove it to be true. But ultimately, that one truth is truth, whether you believe it's yes or no. There's one absolute moral law. There's absolute moral law. There's an absolute moral lawgiver. There's also a civic lawgiver, right? So someone sets the speed limits, right? Someone sets the idea of what you're allowed to do in public and private dwellings, right? There's also civic law. We're talking about moral law, the idea of right and wrong. So how do we know right and wrong? If there is no absolute moral lawgiver, there's no such thing as right and wrong. It's all relative, right, Roy? What you consider right and wrong would be based on your what? Call back to something we talked about at the first top of the personality, but what's the larger word I use, the larger concept I use called the worldview. So your idea of morality would be shaped by your what? Worldview. So if I'm from an area that's pretty tough, like I grew up in a relatively tough area growing up, it was changing. Some of the things, for the suburbs, right? I'm not in the middle of the city or anything. What? No, I wasn't in Oplata. It was outside D.C. You have no idea, Nicholas, where I grew up. You have no idea what I've seen. My school was the first school in our area that had metal detectors. I'll put it to you that way. We had people getting stabbed and everything in school. Nowadays, pretty much every school has almost every, right? But the idea being, right, what I might see based on how I was raised and how I grew up, my morality may be different than yours. I may think. So we also have the morality. Is it against the law for a starving person to steal bread, right? The whole premise of a musical, right? Les Mis, right? is the idea the guy steals bread, right? But no, it's in Aladdin too, but it's in Les Mis. It's my wife's favorite. Oh, by the way, when you see Miss Stacy, everybody who knows Miss Stacy is, wish her happy birthday. It was her birthday yesterday.
Oh, we're gonna see her birthday too. We have a birthday here on Monday. It's Katie's birthday. We have to sing her before.
Yes. All right. So we're going to pause here for now because we're running a little over. We'll pick this back up because this is enough for a couple of weeks worth of ingestion. Actually, I won't be teaching next week. Nicholas will be, but I'll pick it back up next time I teach. All right. So let's pray and then we're going to sing to Katie.
Yeah, I'm gonna sing.